I'm going to return back to my original two splines here. I'm going to make a solid out of this. So let's insert, and instead of surface, what I'm going to do is up here under boss base, I'm going to do a lofted solid. And let's see what happens if you grab that. Now notice the icon for lofted solid is almost identical to the lofted surface. The only difference I can actually see is that one's a little darker shade of yellow. So if I go loft and I grab here and here, it's saying, hey, I don't have any profiles added into here. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. What are you looking at here? If I go to select open loop, it still doesn't bring anything in. I do have an open loop here. This is an open contour. An open contour is a C shape as opposed to a closed contour, which would be an O shape or a D shape. It's completely closed. So it can't find any of those out there, so we're having some problems. So what's going on is it's looking for some closed contours here. So if I get back on sketch 1 and edit it, I can close this contour up. And I have to be careful that I don't get a self-intersecting contour. That confuses it also. So I'm going to alter my spline. Like that. I'm also going to close sketch 2. Sketch 2 may be a little harder to close. Let's grab a line. I'm going to come down a ways, across, and I'll wake up this point. And I have a closed contour there. Now in between these two contours, now I can go insert. Oh, by the way, this is on your features bar too. Features right here is lofted base boss. Now it wants no profiles. I come out and grab this profile, and you can see it's grabbing all of sketch 1. I grab all of sketch 2, and it has no problem at all generating a curve in there. And it looks quite similar to my lofted surface, except it is solid, and so it has a base underneath it. It's completely solid all the way through. It just depends on what you need for modeling purposes, whether you choose a surface or a solid. Now just for fun, let's look at some things that can go wrong here. On my loft, depending on how I grabbed and where I grabbed, remember I grabbed up on top where I clicked and selected. My selection point is pretty important. If I had grabbed down here with my selection point, and I'll just move this green ball down to demonstrate, I'm going to get dramatically different results for my loft. It says, hey, what was that all about? So be careful where you select. Let's see if I can move it again over into here. If you get something very twisted up that looks, I believe it looks kind of, I call it an hourglass shape. It's sort of a self-intersecting string art. That's just a problem with where you selected it. It's a problem, but you can get some really cool looking shapes too. Especially if you like modern art. Okay, let's return it to where it should be. There we go. And I'll demonstrate a few more things with lofts. First thing I wanted to demonstrate is this is a lofted solid. You can still right click on it and you can still add a loft section to it just like a surface. You can move him where you want it, and again, it doesn't look like anything happened, but something very much did happen. It put a new sketch in there, and that sketch is editable. And you can mold these surfaces like clay. Again, very similar to the freeform tool, but with, I believe, quite a bit more control. And you can add as many lofted sections as you need on there. Now what I'd like to demonstrate using guide curves in your loft. So I'm actually going to start this loft over again. We'll delete the loft. I still have my sketches out here. I'm going to open a sketch on top plane. We'll go perpendicular to it, or excuse me, normal to it. And I'm going to start a spline in here. And make some crazy looking spline like this. So you can see it's touching on one area here and not on the others. I'm going to use that for a guide curve for my loft. So I'm going to agree to this sketch. Alright, so I've got my geometry set up here. I'm going to go lofted boss. My profiles. I'll grab my profiles and being careful to grab them on the ends. So my green balls are all in a line here. And then my guide curve, I'm going to come out here and grab my spline. And so the edge of my loft is actually following along this guide curve spline. As is the other side of the loft also. This side over here is trying to follow along my spline as well. So let's edit that feature. What happens if I go to next sharp? Interesting results. So what happens if I go to next edge? How about global? What I've done here is added in yet another sketch and drawn another guide curve on the other side. And let's see if we can get it to behave here. I'll go lofted boss base, pick my profiles, pick my guide curve, pick another guide curve, and you can see it's trying to follow the guide curve on the left hand wall and on the right hand wall over here. And we'll see if it's going to work. And I've got rebuild errors. So guide curve number 2 is invalid. It does not intersect section number 3. Okay, so what's going on there is that my guide curve needs to go through these sections, and so I'm going to open up this sketch, and what I've done is to make sure it goes through this section. If I click on this, I've actually added a pierce point relationship to this area. So I'm going to do a similar thing over here on this one. I'll grab this point, I'll clear my selections. If I hold down Control and grab this spline, notice I've got a pierce relationship at the bottom here. If I hit pierce, it attaches it for me right to the profile. Now when I try to loft, gives me the preview, and let's see if it'll do it. Ta-da! We are molding with virtual clay. I'll just shut these off. I'll hide all my sketches so that they're not cluttering up the works. I think what we have here is maybe Batman's entry into the Pinewood Derby. In order to demonstrate one more feature of lofting, I wanted to start with just a spline curve on one plane, and out about 4 inches in front of it I have another plane drawn, and I've got a sketch open on it. I'm just going to put a single point out here on this sketch and agree to that. That single point, for purposes of a loft, can be considered a profile. And so this will actually generate a loft to a single point. In case you're wondering, this will work for a solid loft too. So I'll go back and delete this surface loft. I'll get on sketch 2, edit sketch 2, and close this profile. We'll come into features and ask for a lofted boss base. Profile 1, profile 2, agree to it, and then it has made a solid. Looks sort of like a paper airplane, only it's really solid now. As the other one was just a piece of foil out there, this is a solid body. Now you might be wondering, what happens if I grab the wrong loft when I do this? I'm going to go back and delete my solid loft. What happens if I have a closed profile and grab a surface loft? And agree to that. It's a very subtle difference, but perhaps you can see this additional line that we have inside here. This would be the piece of paper at the bottom of a snow cone. If I go in here and edit this a little bit, be a little bit easier to see. That shape is hollow all the way down. It's no longer solid, it is completely surfaces. That's what happens.